My own son betrayed me, stealing everything I built, and that's when I decided to make him pay, Cole, in a way he would never forget.
My name is Michael Carter, and I am 71 years old. I've spent decades building a life from nothing, brick by brick, sweat by sweat, and yet, nothing prepared me for the moment I realized my own son had betrayed me. This is the story of Daniel, the son I raised with love and discipline, who one day tried to take everything I had spent a lifetime earning. Asterisk. Before we begin, subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Asterisk. I was born into poverty in a small town in Illinois. My father worked in a factory. My mother sewed clothes for a few extra dollars. Life was hard, and I promised myself I'd never be powerless again. I worked day and night, started small businesses, invested carefully, and eventually founded Carter Holdings, which grew into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. Asterisk. By the time Daniel was born, I thought I had everything. A beautiful family, a secure home, and a future my son could inherit. I tried to teach him everything I knew about honesty, hard work, and respect. I wanted him to succeed not just in wealth, but in character. Asterisk. Daniel was brilliant, I'll give him that. Sharp, ambitious, and determined. But brilliance can be dangerous when mixed with greed. I never noticed the subtle signs in his teenage years, the impatience, the fascination with quick wins, the way he envied peers who had more flashy lifestyles than the one we had. Asterisk. Years passed. Daniel graduated from a top business school and came back home to help me manage the company. I trusted him completely. I even let him handle sensitive tasks, believing a son's loyalty is unshakable. Asterisk. Then, my wife passed away. It was a dark period for both of us. Daniel moved back into my home to take care of me, and I welcomed him without hesitation. Asterisk. At first, everything seemed normal. He managed meetings, responded to emails, and handled paperwork. But one evening, I caught him whispering on the phone, pacing the hallway. When I entered, he hung up abruptly. Asterisk. Everything okay? I asked. Asterisk. Yeah, just business, he said, with a tight smile. I'm planning something big. Asterisk. I believed him. I wanted to trust him. But within months, the truth hit me like a lightning strike. Asterisk. While I was recovering from a minor heart episode, Daniel forged my signature, manipulated legal documents, and transferred millions of dollars and ownership of properties into accounts under his control. He had stolen not just my money, but my entire empire, the life I built from nothing. When I confronted him, he smirked. Dad, you've worked hard, but I can take it further. Time to let me handle things. Asterisk. I was shocked. My own son had betrayed me. But anger alone would not fix this. I had to plan carefully, strike strategically, and wait for the perfect moment. Asterisk. I learned that day a bitter truth. Greed can blind even the closest hearts, and trust can be shattered in a heartbeat. Asterisk. Daniel thought he had one, but the father he betrayed was already moving silently in the shadows, preparing a revenge that would change everything. Asterisk. After Daniel stole my fortune, he acted as if nothing had happened. He wore the mask of loyalty perfectly, smiling in my presence, handling company meetings, and posting images to social media as if he were the visionary heir of Carter Holdings. Yet behind the mask, he was orchestrating a takeover that left me stunned and furious. Asterisk. I had to be careful. Acting rashly would alert him. Greed makes people bold but reckless, and Daniel was no exception. He began firing old employees, replacing them with young men who worshipped money rather than loyalty. He renegotiated deals without consulting me, flaunted luxury cars, and threw parties in offices I had built with decades of hard work. Asterisk. The deeper I looked, the more I realized how calculated he was. He had forged not just signatures, but friendships. He had convinced investors, some longtime allies of mine, that he was the rightful heir. He even went so far as to try to sell a property that I had earmarked for charity. Asterisk. I knew I had to strike silently. Patience would be my weapon. I began documenting everything: emails, messages, transfers, and conversations. I reached out to Laura Jennings, my trusted legal advisor. She had worked with me since the company's first warehouse and knew every loophole in our contracts. Asterisk. One evening, I instructed Laura to bring forensic analysts. They began tracking every email and signature, creating digital evidence that would withstand even the most thorough investigation. Every forged document, every altered record, every illegal transfer was slowly being traced back to him. Asterisk. Meanwhile, I let Daniel continue his reign. I watched him grow arrogant. He boasted to friends, "I'm building an empire my father could only dream of." He laughed at employees, belittled managers, and flaunted my wealth as if it were his own. His confidence blinded him, and that made him predictable. I also began subtle psychological maneuvers. I hinted to investors that something wasn't right with the property transfers, enough to make them hesitate without realizing I had planted the idea. Every move I made was invisible, calculated, like pieces on a chessboard. At home, he still played the caring son. He asked about my health, prepared meals, and smiled when I entered the room. But I had learned to read him, that Daniel I Reyes no longer existed. In his place was a man who had chosen power over family. One night, he threw a party in my penthouse. I observed silently from a corner, unnoticed. He laughed, bragged, and toasted to new beginnings. Every word he spoke made me angrier, but I controlled my emotion. Anger is dangerous when you are planning a precise strike. I whispered to myself, the higher he climbs, the harder he will fall. Daniel thought he was untouchable, but in the shadows, his father was quietly assembling the evidence that would shatter everything he had stolen, and his perfect mask of loyalty would finally crack. Daniel's arrogance grew with each passing day. He thought he had outsmarted me, thinking that as the heir apparent, he controlled everything. He didn't realize that every move he made was being tracked, every lie documented, every fraudulent signature cross-checked. One morning, I received a call from a major investor in our foreign project. He sounded hesitant. Mr. Carter, we've noticed irregularities in the documents Daniel submitted. Can you clarify? I replied calmly. I will look into it. The seed of doubt had been planted. That same week, Laura presented the compiled forensic evidence. The documents, digital timestamps, and email logs were undeniable. Daniel had forged signatures and transferred millions illegally. His empire, built on lies, could collapse overnight. I did not confront him yet. Revenge must be executed carefully. Instead, I prepared multiple contingencies, legal complaints, investor meetings, and private notifications to auditors. Everything needed to collapse simultaneously for maximum impact. Daniel continued, flaunting his wealth. He moved into my private office, thinking he owned it. He dismissed loyal employees, hiring flashy young managers who knew nothing about the company's history. He renegotiated contracts with foreign investors, promising deals I had never approved. I played my part. I let him think he was in control. I smiled when he bragged about outshining his father, but internally, I was constructing a storm he could not weather. Late one night, I accessed the surveillance footage from the office. Daniel was on his laptop, transferring large sums, sending forged approvals, and laughing with colleagues who were unaware they were complicit. He was reckless. The higher he rose, the more exposed he became. Then came the first crack in his armor. An investor called, suddenly wary. We need independent verification of the signatures, they said. Daniel panicked. He hadn't considered that someone outside the company would verify his documents. I waited. I observed. I let fear begin to nibble at him, and it worked. Daniel was human, and human weaknesses are always exploitable. I also started planting small, subtle suggestions to him at home, offhand comments about loyalty, trust, and the price of betrayal. He ignored them, but they stayed in his mind. Subtle psychological pressure can be just as powerful as legal evidence. By now, Daniel was no longer just ambitious. He was paranoid, constantly checking emails, watching employees, and questioning investors. This paranoia was the perfect environment for me to strike decisively. Daniel's empire seemed untouchable, but in the next weeks, the carefully hidden evidence would erupt, leaving him exposed, desperate, and facing the consequences of his greed. It was a Monday morning when everything began to unravel. I scheduled a private meeting with Daniel under the guise of discussing an expansion deal. He arrived confident, smiling. He had no idea that his world was about to collapse. I handed him a folder. Daniel, these documents require your signature. He glanced at it, confused. The folder contained verified copies of his own forged documents, now cross-referenced by our legal team and auditors. What is this? He asked. Evidence. I replied simply. Evidence that you forged signatures, transferred company assets illegally, and misled investors. His face paled. He tried to laugh. Dad, you're joking, right? I'm not, I said. The authorities have been notified. Investors are pulling out. Your accounts are frozen. Panic hit him like a wave. He stumbled backward. You can't. This isn't real. Asterisk, it is real, I said quietly, and it's all traceable. You could face criminal charges. Asterisk, he turned to storm out, but I continued, or, you can make it right. I laid out 3 conditions. 1. Return every asset he illegally transferred. Asterisk. 2. Resign from the company immediately. Asterisk. 3. Start working at the bottom, learning what it truly means to earn. Asterisk. Daniel froze. Pride and fear battled in his eyes. Start at the bottom. Asterisk. Yes, I said. Humility is the lesson you've avoided learning for too long. Asterisk. He stared at me in disbelief. For the first time, he saw the father he underestimated. Asterisk. I left him to make his choice. Within 24 hours, he signed the papers. Every fraudulent asset was returned. Every account reversed. Every investor satisfied. Asterisk. At home, he avoided me. The once confident man had become quiet, introspective, and anxious. He didn't understand it yet, but the first step toward redemption had begun. Asterisk. Daniel's first defeat was just the beginning. True transformation would demand patience, humility, and time, lessons only life could teach under the watchful eye of the father he betrayed. Asterisk. With the legal documents signed and fraudulent transfers reversed, Daniel's outward appearance remained calm, but internally he was crumbling. The once confident man who laughed in my office now wandered the hallways nervously, constantly checking emails, meetings, and even the smallest company interactions. Pride and fear were warring inside him. Asterisk. I did not relent. My revenge had begun, but it needed to reach its peak impact. I met privately with investors Daniel had relied on. Carefully, I revealed the truth. The forged documents, the unauthorized deals, the reckless promises. Investors panicked. Several contracts were cancelled. Accounts were frozen. Overnight, the empire Daniel had built on lies began to crumble. Asterisk. Daniel called me in desperation. Dad, you can't do this, he yelled. You're ruining everything I worked for. Asterisk. I remained calm. I'm not ruining anything. I'm restoring order. What you stole from me, you must return and learn the consequences of your actions. Asterisk. He accused me of being harsh. I nodded, unashamed. Harshness is the only language greed understands. Asterisk. Meanwhile, word spread through the company. Employees whispered about Daniel's sudden downfall. Those who once feared him now saw him as vulnerable, exposed. The confidence he wielded as a weapon had evaporated. Asterisk. At home, I watched him silently. He avoided my eyes, moved cautiously, and barely spoke. I allowed him the illusion of freedom, but every move he made was still observed. Trust, once broken, cannot be easily rebuilt. Asterisk. Then came the media exposure. A financial news outlet reported on the frozen accounts, highlighting the fraudulent transfers. Daniel was no longer the young prodigy. He was the man whose ambition had turned against him. He could blame no one but himself. Asterisk. Late one night, I saw him sitting alone in my old study, staring at the city skyline. The man who once thought he had conquered everything now seemed small, defeated, and reflective. Asterisk. I realized something essential. Revenge is not merely punishment. It is the process of teaching a lesson that cannot be learned any other way. Asterisk. Daniel had faced the first wave of consequences, but the ultimate lesson had yet to be delivered. He still needed to understand humility, patience, and the true cost of betrayal. Asterisk. Daniel had lost his empire, but the father he betrayed was far from finished. The final confrontation was looming, and it would leave lessons carved deep into his soul. Asterisk. The night of the confrontation arrived quietly, almost unremarkably. Daniel, unaware of the precision in my planning, believed his defeat was complete. I summoned him to my private office, the place he had once occupied with smug confidence. Asterisk. He entered, eyes wary, voice low. What now, Dad? Haven't you punished me enough? Asterisk. I gestured for him to sit. No. Punishment alone changes nothing. You must understand why what you did was unforgivable. Asterisk. I walked him through every transaction, every forged signature, and every reckless decision he had made. I showed him how his empire relied not on skill, but on deception. Look at yourself, I said. All of this could have been yours legitimately, but you chose greed instead of integrity. Asterisk. His face turned pale. I thought I could handle it, he muttered. I thought I was smarter than everyone. Asterisk. You were only smarter than your conscience, I replied. And when a man's ambition surpasses his morality, he falls. Asterisk. Then came the most crucial part of my lesson. I laid out his path forward, returned to the company, but not as an heir, not as a director, as a learner. Asterisk. You will start at the bottom, I said. Sweep floors, organize inventory, observe operations. You will earn respect before you ever earn power again. Asterisk, Daniel's jaw dropped. You want me to work like an employee? Asterisk, yes. And if you fail, you will know exactly what it feels like to be powerless. Asterisk, he hesitated, shame flooding his expression. I could see the weight of his mistakes settling in. The arrogance he carried for years had been stripped away, replaced with something rarer, humility born from consequence. Asterisk, for hours, we discussed the plan. He argued, hesitated, and finally nodded, silently acknowledging that he had no other choice. He signed the voluntary papers, agreeing to return every asset and accept the position I offered. Asterisk, the confrontation ended not with rage, but with a quiet understanding. Daniel had faced the storm I had prepared, and he had survived it only by accepting responsibility. Asterisk. Daniel had finally met the father he underestimated, but the true test of his character had only just begun. Asterisk. Daniel started his new role quietly, carrying boxes, sweeping floors, and reporting to supervisors half his age. His colleagues watched, initially in disbelief. The man who had once ruled the company now learned the value of discipline, patience, and respect. Asterisk, at first, Daniel resented every task. Every instruction felt humiliating. Every glance from employees who once feared him felt like mockery. But slowly, day by day, he began to understand what it meant to work for something honestly. I watched silently, guiding him when necessary, but never intervening unless absolutely needed. He apologized to employees he had wronged, began attending meetings with humility, and learned that authority is earned, not inherited. Asterisk, weeks turned into months. Daniel's confidence returned, but it was now tempered with humility. He stopped flaunting wealth, listened more than he spoke, and developed a newfound respect for loyalty and hard work. Asterisk, one evening, Mr. Howard, a longtime company employee, approached me. He's changing, he said. You've done something no punishment could have done. Asterisk, I nodded. Sometimes, the most valuable lesson comes from seeing the consequences of your actions firsthand. Money alone cannot teach it. Asterisk, Daniel's transformation was gradual but undeniable. He began making thoughtful decisions, considering employees' perspectives, and understanding that success without integrity is meaningless. Asterisk, he came home one night, exhausted but reflective. Dad, I understand now. I don't want to be the man I was. Thank you for showing me the way. Asterisk, I smiled, finally seeing the son I had once raised, tempered now by the fire of experience. Asterisk, Daniel had survived the storm, but the final moment of closure, the true passing of the legacy, was still ahead. Asterisk, years later, when I retired, I handed the company to Daniel, not as a gift, not as an inheritance, but as a man passing a legacy to someone who had earned it. Asterisk, he had transformed completely. The arrogance and greed were gone, replaced with humility, discipline, and respect. Employees who once doubted him now trusted him. The company thrived under his careful, honest leadership. Asterisk, I looked at him and said, Daniel, wealth is not the measure of a man. Respect, integrity, and loyalty are. Asterisk, he nodded, understanding finally the lesson I had worked to teach. Greed may steal fortunes, but it can never earn respect, and respect is the only wealth that truly lasts. Asterisk, we sat together, father and son, knowing that the bond between us, once broken, had been rebuilt stronger than ever. The storm had passed, lessons were learned, family had survived. Asterisk, and now, to all of you watching this story, asterisk, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Asterisk, thank you for watching. I'll meet you in the next story. Asterisk, remember, betrayal may shake a family, but wisdom, patience, and justice can rebuild it stronger than ever.